So we are going to talk about being a commissioner to Presbytery of Tampa Bay. That's what we are here to learn about. I do want to just give a brief overview of what we're going to talk about, what we're going to cover, and let you know as well you can keep notes. But I am recording this, so I'm going to send out, I'll send this out to you if you send me your email in the chat. I'll email you the recording when it's done. If you need it, hopefully this, you probably, I don't even know if you'll need this information. Hopefully you absorb it in the amount of time that we're going to use for this. Okay, so what are we going to learn? We're primarily going to talk about what happens at a Presbytery meeting, what to expect, and some of the basic rules and basic knowledge that you need in order to really participate at your folk. This is also an opportunity for you to ask questions, for you to ask me anything that might be on your mind about, well, what is the Presbytery? What are we doing there? What did I get myself into? Why did I say yes to the pastor when they asked me to do this? Those sorts of questions, or just any questions that may come up as we're going through material. So this is just your chance to sort of interact with me and figure out a little bit more about what's going on. Also, we're going to talk about what's expected of you, because this is, this is a participatory form of government, and there are things that you're agreeing to by agreeing to be a commissioner to the Presbytery. So that's what we're going to cover. Are there any questions so far? Okay, so the main thing that you need to remember or need to know about being a commissioner to the Presbytery is that you are a commissioner, not a delegate. What that means is that nobody can tell you who to vote for, how to vote, what to say, when to say it, that sort of thing. You are, your decisions are between you and the Holy Spirit. There is no authority that your pastor has, that the other members of your church have, that the session has, that your spouse has. Nobody can tell you which way to vote. It's entirely up to your conscience, entirely up to how you feel God leading you, and hopefully you're keeping that part in mind. But it's entirely up to you. Now that's the upside, but that's also a little bit of a downside, because it means that you're expected to know the material. You're expected to actually read the Presbytery Packet ahead of time, understand what it is that you are voting on, one way or the other, and if you have questions about it, to be able to raise those questions at the appropriate time and get your answers. Because the theory behind Presbyterian government, of course, is that we're smarter together. We're better able to discern the Holy Spirit together. Now, I've seen that happen in the exact opposite way many a time. It's not perfect. It doesn't always happen that way. But at the very least, there's a better chance that somebody is going to, if we're all young, we're all saying, whatever it is that's on our hearts, there's a better chance that we're going to come to wise decisions. So that's what Presbytery is. If you're unfamiliar with just the whole concept, Presbytery, of course, is that group of pastors and ruling elders that come together to make decisions for the Presbyterian churches in the area. And we've got about 65 churches in our Presbytery. Until very recently, we were organized by region. We had East, Central, and West. And each of those regions was sort of doing business on their own. Now we're kind of moving back to a more inclusive model where everyone is part of the Presbytery, and we're having 4 Presbytery meetings again. We're going to talk a little bit about that later. But we are, we're coming together to make decisions, and part of making the decisions is knowing the material. So hopefully you have already downloaded the Presbytery Packet. Does everybody have a document that looks like this? It's a 43-page PDF. Okay, so if you don't have this, or if you don't know where to find this, it's on the Presbytery website and can be found, I guess I'll open up, can be found on presbyteryoftampabay.com. Right here on the upper right it says August 23rd meeting materials, and that's also where the summary is going to be printed. So after, one of the responsibilities that you have as a commissioner is to report to the session. So you'll be reporting to your session on what happened at the Presbytery. So there's going to be the day after the Presbytery or the day of the Presbytery in the evening, there'll be a little link right here and a little link under resources that will have the summary of the Presbytery meeting, which you can use as a report to your session. But I got off track there, and what we're trying to talk about is the Presbytery Packet. So you can find it on the Presbytery website in a couple of places, but right here is where I wanted to show you. And you need to read this ahead of time. Now there are two sections to this. There is the main packet, and then there's an appendix. The main packet is 43 pages, and it's mostly information about the meeting and reports from committees and commissions. Now, there's lots of very important information in here. The thing that I really wanted to highlight was the consent agenda. The consent agenda is right after the docket, and the reason why I wanted to highlight this is because the consent agenda is going to come up very fast right at the beginning of the meeting, and if there's anything on the consent agenda that you wanted to talk about, it would need to be done right at the beginning of the meeting, and you would need to stand up when we talked about passing the consent agenda and say, hey, I want to take this item off. There's basically a very, very small consent agenda this time, so that's probably not going to be an issue. Although there is a mistake on the consent agenda that I'm going to have to bring up and talk about at the meeting. Whoever put this packet together, which was me, by the way, but whoever put this packet together put the wrong date for our November meeting. It's supposed to be November 7th. So we'll have to get that changed on the floor of the Presbytery at the consent agenda time. Okay, so if you do have that packet in front of you or open or around, we're going to look at page 8, and we're going to just talk a little bit about the orientation materials, where I can tell you what's going on with the Presbytery meeting, and then what specifically is going to happen this particular Thursday. So we've talked about being you're a commissioner, not a delegate. It is probably a good idea to know who our moderator is, and who is who's on the Presbytery. Ooh, I don't want that. Where are we? I'm going to show you our Presbytery officers. Hopefully I've got pictures of them on the website. So we don't have a picture of Libby. Mike looks a little squished, but we got Lowly at least. Lowly at least gave me a good picture. And so we've got our moderator, Reverend Libby Shannon. Libby is one of the chaplains at Eckerd. She's a younger person such as myself. She's the moderator, and her job is to make sure the meeting goes well. And usually it's also to appoint people who are going to be on administrative committees or anything that kind of comes up in the middle of the year that needs someone appointed. That's usually her job. So she appoints people. She'll also next year be the chair of the coordinating team, which is the group that sort of makes decisions for the Presbytery while the Presbytery isn't meeting. And it's all the chairs of the committees are on the coordinating team, as well as Patrice and I, and Terry Dennis, who's the treasurer. So the vice moderator, Lowly, is the pastor at Sefner, and she will moderate part of the meeting, and she's kind of the moderator in training. So next year she'll be the moderator, The year after that, she'll be the chair of the coordinating team. So she's super, super friendly, very nice. If you don't know Lily, make sure to say hi. The Presbytery Coach Coordinator will give a report. That's Patrice Hatley. If you don't know Patrice, definitely want to know Patrice. She is the executive of the Presbytery. She is the pastor to the pastor. She's the person who really is the mover and shaker who, if your church has a problem, she'd probably be the one to talk with you, unless it was a problem about polity or rules or something like that, which it would be me. But she's also the staff liaison for the majority of our committees. So definitely Patrice is a good person to talk to. Myself, I'll be there. I'll be up on the stage. I won't be the sage on the stage. I'll be the stated clerk on the stage. So I sit up there with a microphone, and I only use it when absolutely necessary. And I'll be up there. You'll know who I am because you can see me now. But I am responsible at the Presbytery meeting for the parliamentary procedure. So if there's a question about are things being done decently and in order, are we following Robert's rules, something along those lines, it's my job to kind of answer that, as well as to kind of keep the meeting on track in a few other ways. But mostly I'll be resourcing the moderator and vice moderator. I do help plan the meetings, and I prepare the packet. And I'm also the director of communications, so I do all the web stuff and that kind of thing as well. Terry Dennis is our treasurer. We will be hearing a report from him. We do not pay him nearly enough because we pay him nothing. He's a volunteer, but he is very well loved, very, very competent, and just does a great job. So we'll be hearing from him on Thursday as well. Fortunately, the finances are doing pretty well right now, which is quite a turnaround. It wasn't that way 5 years ago. The acronyms at the Presbytery meeting, these are, only the military loves acronyms more than Presbyterians, I believe, I think, or so I've heard. So these are some of the acronyms that you'll hear that people who are in the Presbytery and who've been around the Presbytery for years will think nothing of rattling off that you might not recognize when you hear. So these are just there to help you understand what's being said. COM stands for Commission on Ministry. They are the main body. They're like the main Presbytery group that makes decisions about pastors and positions. So they have to approve every church's hiring or firing of a pastor. They help churches to find pastors. They help pastors going into and out of the Presbytery, and also chaplains and pretty much any other ordained person who is ordained as a minister of the Word and Sacrament with their membership in the Presbytery. So that's chaired by Laurie Palmer. Laurie, unfortunately, will not be able to be at the Presbytery meeting on Thursday. We're not sure yet who is going to replace her for her report. But she had a family emergency and had to be in Baton Rouge. So the regional chairs and the commissional ministry will continue to operate in regions, even though the Presbytery will not. The regional chairs are in the East, Chris Maroney, who I believe is an elder at Hope Winter Haven. In the central region, it's Nicole Apnoir, and she is one of the pastors at Palmacia. And then Michael Clark, who is the clerk of session at Church on the Bayou of Tarpon Springs, and he's the West Region chair. So these are all really important folks for churches to know, because of course the COM, if you've been on session for any length of time, you've probably been through a COM visit, because they used to do what were called triennial visits, and I think they're now maybe biennial. So they try to get around once every year or two to each session to make sure that things are okay, and to just listen. And if there's ever a problem, it's really good to know that they're there and to know who your liaison is. The CPM stand, and if at any time anyone has a question, just say something, pipe up. send me a chat and I'll stop and we can talk about it. So there's only like parts here. The CPM stands for Commission on Preparation for Ministry, and they are the ones who are primarily responsible for people who are interested in becoming pastors. So if you have someone in your church who is thinking about being ordained or is thinking about going to seminary or something along those lines, then you would want to get them in contact with the CPM as soon as possible. And that is chaired by Deb Belusa. And we love this committee because it's always very positive and always very fun to see people go through that process. The CCV stands for the for the Commission on Church Vitality. Their leaders are Nikki Robinson. She's the one who primarily chairs this. And the regional chairs are Joy Lothridge in the West, Paula Salt, and Joy is the pastor at St. Andrew's, Dunedin, if you didn't know her. She's also about my age, she's younger. Paula Salter is she's not a pastor, but she is one of the session members at St. Andrew, New Tampa, St. Andrew versus St. Andrews, and she's at Laurie's church, and Evelyn McMullen in the East region. And I forget where Evelyn goes. Is she at Lakeland?
Yeah, she's First Pres Lakeland.
I thought so. But I wasn't 100% on it. Mm-hmm. So these are the folks that you really want to get to know because the CCV, if you don't know what the CCV does, it's because they do everything. They are kind of the pot into which all of the uncertainties were poured when we were revisioning the Presbytery. And so they have the advantage to that, or the good thing about that, is that they have a lot of leeway and they have a lot of money. They each have a really big pot assigned to them that they will give to churches if the church has a mission idea or an evangelism idea or an outreach thing or something along those lines, as long as it's not a loan to fix the roof or something along those lines. You want to see the trustees for that. But the CCV has got expertise and they've got cash. So these are very good people to get to know. This is a very underutilized resource. At the end of every year, there's always a ton of money left over that is there for the asking if our churches have ideas that they want to use to implement. So I'm not saying that, obviously, I'm not saying take advantage of this. I'm saying be aware of it. If your church is looking to do something innovative, they'd probably love to hear about it. They'd probably love to help. So CCV, that's what they do. The NRC, or Nominating and Representation Committee. So if you make it all the way through this webinar and all the way through the Presbytery meeting, and you're excited and you think this is fun, then you might want to talk to Slay, who is the chair of Nominating and Representation, about a position on a Presbytery committee. Because we are always looking for folks to serve on one of these committees, as their gifts and talents enable them. And, that's something that she would be able to help you with. We have, I want to say about 140-ish, something like that, volunteer positions that we fill every year. So it's, they're usually 3-year terms, but we're always trying to keep these full. So it's a lot of positions. The trustees are the commission that deals with the financial side and with the legal side of the Presbytery business. So they handle a lot of questions like insurance or loans to churches or advising churches about legal matters or property matters, things along those lines. So their approval is required if you're going to lease your sanctuary to another church or have a lease of 5 years or more, something like that, or if you're going to sell property. If you've got a vacant lot next to the church that you want to sell. That's something that actually does require the Presbytery's approval, unless except in rare cases where your church had opted out of that back in 1980. 1983, I think, back in the coordinating team I talked about earlier. They're the group that is made up of all of the committee chairs, of all of the, from each of these committees that we've mentioned. And they meet once a month to kind of update each other about what's going on in the various committees, and also do that in the Presbytery. A lot of the leadership ideas come out of the coordinating team. Okay, so those are all of the committees and commissions of the Presbytery. I'm really impressed that that we made it through that. Are there any questions about any of these committees or commissions? Are we still awake? Alan?
It seems pretty straightforward.
Good.
Okay, so we're ready to go forward. The next thing that I'm going to talk about is Robert's Rules of Order. You may know Robert's Rules already. That may be something that you use in your session if your session is a slightly larger body. If not, you've probably used this on other boards of other organizations or just seen it on TV. So Robert's Rules are what we use and what we're obligated to use by the Book of Order in our meetings. So all of our meetings are supposed to employ Robert's Rules. If you're unfamiliar with Roberts, if you don't know a thing about Roberts, some of what happens at the Presbytery meeting is going to be very dense and very incomprehensible and very, very hard to understand. So in order for you to be able to fully participate, which is what we want you to be able to participate to do the best job for the Lord that you can. We need to teach you a little bit of Robert's Rules. So in a very short, kind of one-page format, I'm going to take you through everything that you actually need to know about Robert's Rules to make it through a Presbytery meeting. So this is not everything about Roberts. This is just the basics, the core stuff that you need in order to make it through Roberts. Now, a couple of things to know about Roberts. The primary thing that Roberts is really trying to do is, or one of a couple, is to protect the rights of the minority. To make sure that the minority is not squashed by the majority, but that they're able to express their opinions and that they're able to say what they want to say in a way that is decent and in order, in a way that is orderly and that protects everybody's rights. So we're trying to do things in a way that doesn't end in an argument or a shootout or something like that, while also giving everyone the chance to feel and be heard. One of the primary ways that we do that is that and there's not really going to be anything controversial at this meeting, I think, but this is good to know if you go back for future meetings. When there is a topic that's being debated, you address your comments not to the last speaker. So let's say that there's someone who speaks for something that you're against, and you think, man, that's just totally wrong, and you get up to speak on the opposite side of it. You don't address your remarks to the person who just spoke and that you disagree with. You address your remarks to the moderator, to Libby Shannon in this case. You address your remarks to the person who is sort of the one who's maintaining order. So in that way, you're not hopefully inflaming any passions or something like that. Presbyterians, we're not known for that. So we're trying to maintain our equanimity, our peace, and aim our comments at the moderator for that reason. So another similar principle is you almost never want to interrupt someone else who's speaking. You almost always want to let somebody else have their say, and when they're done, then is the time to respond. Now, there are a couple of exceptions to that, and all of these exceptions relate to your rights to participate. So there are just a couple of these that we're going to talk about. If you can't hear what's going on, or if you're so, hot or cold, or something is disturbing you in the room to where you can't stay in the room, you can stand up at any time, even if the moderator is in the middle of talking, and say point of privilege. And then you explain the problem. Like, point of privilege. I can't see the projector from where I'm sitting. Point of privilege. The AC is way too low. I'm, about to die. And you can do that at any time because it's keeping you from participating. Another thing that you would say that you're able to interrupt another speaker is to say point of order. So you can stand up if you think that something was wrong about what just happened from a Robert's Rules standpoint, like something unfair or something not right or something against the rules happened. You can stand up and say point of order and explain the problem, and then it's the chair's job to figure out if you're right or not. The last thing that I want to discuss that is along this line is you can stand up and say point of information if you have some information that you want from the person up on the stage who's giving a report. So for instance, the chair of COM is giving a report and you want to have more information about what they're saying. You can just you don't have to wait your turn necessarily. You can stand up and say point of information. But that's not an opportunity for you to give information, but for you to receive it, because everybody might want that. Those probably won't come up. I've been going to Presbytery meetings for 15 years, and I've only seen this happen like maybe 3 times. But it's good to know. Another thing that probably will come up if there's a debate is something called call the question or move the previous question. It used, like in earlier days, it was move the previous question. In the more recent editions of Roberts, it's call the question. Now, all that means is that you think that when someone, you have to wait until you're called upon to say this. So you stand up at the mic and wait in line. Moderator calls on you. You say, call the question. And what that means is that you think it's time for us to stop debating and vote. We've talked enough. We're talking in circles. Let's vote. And so there's no debate on that motion. The moderator will or should immediately say, okay, we're calling the question. And then you vote on whether or not to end debate. If that vote is in the affirmative, debate stops. And then you have another vote immediately following that on whatever it is that you were debating. So whatever we were talking about, that motion gets voted on right away. And you quite possibly will hear that. This is something that comes up pretty much every time there's a debate at Presbytery. So you probably will hear that if we have any form of debate, which I'm not anticipating. But still, that's a very good thing to know about so that you know to use it. It's also good to know about because it's extremely confusing if you don't know what that means, because you're going to vote and then you're going to vote again and you're like, didn't we just vote? And you could get confused about what you're voting on with that if you'd never heard it before. Now that does need a 2/3 majority to pass, again, because Roberts is very concerned about maintaining the rights of minorities to vote or to speak, to make sure that they're not being trampled on by the majority. Amendments to main motions. This is another thing that's somewhat common, although very uncommon in our presbytery, but in most presbyteries it's much more common. If you want to amend a motion, you just wait to be called on, and then you say, I move to amend the motion, and tell us how you want to change it. It does have to be voted on, then it will be discussed. There's no such thing as withdrawing a motion to amend, or there's no such thing as withdrawing a motion. Once you've made a motion and it's been seconded, it doesn't belong to you anymore. It belongs to the body, and they can do what they want with it. So that's something that you might have seen in a session meeting informally. Someone might ask, "Oh, do you want to withdraw the motion?" But there's no such thing as that. That's just something that's done informally. That's not part of Roberts at all. At least not modern, not version 11 or whatever it is we're working with today. So just be aware of that for the presbytery floor. Substitute motions are very similar to amendments, but if you want to change something substantially, then you would use a substitute motion, but the process is more or less the same. The last thing, not the last thing, the next to last thing that you need to know is that a division of the House is something that you can call for. Now what that means is basically count. If you think that the vote was close, because the moderator might say, all in favor say aye, and all opposed like sign, or all opposed say nay, then is it close? Is it not close? If you have any doubt at all, it's fine to stand up and say division of the House, which just means we're going to count people, either by raised hand or ballot. And that happens all the time too. That's not uncommon at all. At least when something controversial is being discussed. Now, order of the day. This is just a term that is good to know. What it means when you see that on the agenda is that this is a time-sensitive item that we are going to stop doing whatever it is we were doing, and we're going to do that instead. So if there's something that says, say, 12 p.m., order of the day, lunch, what that means is that at 12 p.m., even if we're in the middle of voting on something, even if we're right, we're so close, we need to stop doing that and just pick it right back up where we left off and go do whatever the order of the day was. So we don't always stick to that, but that's what that means, and that's what we're supposed to do. And occasionally we'll get called out on that by somebody who knows Robert's rules in the Presbytery meeting if we're not following it. The last couple things that I wanted to mention about the meeting itself that are not in Robert's but are important to know. When you speak, please come to the microphone. If you're going to speak, come to the microphone, state your name, whether you are a minister of the Word and Sacrament or an elder. I believe we've got all elders on the call tonight, and what church you're from. And then address your comments to the moderator. Also, please, when you sign in, you're going to come in, you'll register. There'll be a registration table, and you'll sign in as an elder from your church, an elder commissioner from your church. And they're going to give you a packet. Not this packet, not the full 100-page packet. They're going to give you a little, a worship packet with the worship service and a name tag, which is on a lanyard. So we want that back. And we also would like the evaluation form. Now, the evaluation form, if you don't get a chance to fill it out at the meeting, is also going to be completable online. So you can fill that out online later if need be. But we would rather have that at the meeting and at the end of the meeting. Okay, so any questions about Robert's rules? Sharp bunch. Okay. I do want to mention very briefly a little bit about what makes our presbytery different. We did go through a transformation process about 5 years ago. Now, part of that process was we decided to try out maybe splitting into 3 smaller presbyteries. And our thought was that we would get more done and we get more relationships built if we did work in more regional, smaller, closer-knit groups. It kind of worked out and it kind of didn't. People were happier than they had been, according to our surveys, but they also didn't really like the regional model. We decided we weren't going to split into 3 presbyteries, and once we decided that, we were kind of thinking, well, why are we doing work in 3 different regions if we're not going to become 3 different presbyteries? So right now we're in the middle again of trying to figure out, well, we still want to know each other better. We still want to do things a little bit differently. So we're trying something now called networking groups. And the networking groups are meant to be groups that are self-directed, not top-down but bottom-up, and organized around interests and various status. Like if you're a clerk of session, you might want to come to the clerk of session group, or if you're interested in social justice, you might want to go to the social justice group, or evangelism, you might want to go to the evangelism group, that sort of thing. So we're trying that out, and we're going to meet more frequently as a presbytery 4 times a year instead of 2 times, which means that you'll have more opportunities to come to presbytery meetings. Okay, and you also are going to have more opportunities to spend time in these groups. So that's our thinking, and we're trying that out. We'll see how that works. Finally, I want to mention what's actually happening at our meeting coming up. So we have got a few things going on that are kind of big and interesting. The first is that we are going to be looking at a revised set of bylaws and a revised manual of operations that you can read in the appendix. The appendix has all of the changes in very detailed form. You don't need to read all of this if you don't want to. There's a 1-page summary in the Presbytery Packet on page 29 that you can read that will give you a very good overview. And if you have any questions, you can go to the appendix and look at it and see if you liked the change or not. If you don't like a change, if you see a different change you want to make, you can make it on the floor of Presbytery. It'd be very nice if you would email me and give me a heads up. But you can make that change on the floor of Presbytery if you see something that you think needs to be different. We typically have no problem with that. But again, it is nice to have warning if you do see something ahead of time. The big one, I think, socially and just for the Presbytery, is the retirement of Pastor Mike Lout. He has been if you're not familiar with Mike is currently the chair of the coordinating team, and he has been the pastor of First Pres of Lakeland for 19 years, apparently. He has been in the Presbytery for a really long time, great guy, served on the Peace, Unity, and Purity Task Force back in the day. Really like Mike quite a bit. A lot of people feel the same, and he is going to be retiring or announcing his retirement and celebrating his retirement for the Presbytery at this meeting, and I expect just a ton of people to show up and be there for that. So that should be sort of a highlight. That'll be happening right after worship, right after the break after worship. So that'll be in the morning, probably about 10:30. It'll probably get a little thin in the Presbytery, in the sanctuary after that. The other thing that we'll be doing is approving per capita and meeting locations, and also approving an administrative commission for Northwest Presbyterian Church. You can read about that on page 28. And other items are more or less Presbytery business as usual, and our networking groups. Okay, thank you all so much for your patience and attention. Are there any questions just in general about any part of this process? Is there any feedback about how we could make this better next time, or anything like that?
Nothing I can think of right now.
Oh, no, it was a good presentation. This is Craig speaking, and we appreciate you taking time and explaining things to us. I like the perspective.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad it was helpful. If there was anything particularly helpful or that wasn't particularly helpful, please let me know either here or via email so that we can make it better next time. I do like this format better. What we had been doing was doing this the day of the meeting, and the advantage to that, in some advantage and disadvantage, is usually it lasted about 15 minutes because that's all the time we had. But people would come in and out at all points during it, and it was very distracting, just very, very hard to get any information across. Okay, well, again, thank you all so much for your service and for your willingness to serve as Presbytery commissioners. I hope that we don't scare you off on Thursday, that you'll be back. Presbytery is actually, it's more fun than I thought it would be. I I didn't, obviously I became a Christian when I became a Christian, I wasn't thinking, I'm gonna go to Presbytery meetings. So, you don't think that, but it actually is really fun and interesting to get the work of the broader church done in these ways, in these councils. So thank you for your service and your willingness to do that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, well, God bless. And if you want the recording of this, just send me an email. And and Mary Ellen says, great review of Robert's Rules. I needed a refresher. So thank you all again, and God bless. So I will see you on Thursday.
Okay, thank you very much.
We'll see you. Bye now.
All right, bye-bye.